3 million pills, $10 million in assets, and heavy machinery taken down in one operation. But here's the part no one talks about. This lab didn't look illegal at all. In the next few minutes, you'll see how investigators read machines like a balance sheet, and how that finally cracked a crime everyone else missed. Veteran agents stepped through the threshold and stopped, not for cover, but to sketch the floor like they were auditing a legal plant. The silence hit first. No chaos, no loose baggies, no random burners chiming. A straight shot from the entry showed a clean line. Raw material to blend, blend to granulate, granulate to press, press to coat, coat to pack. It read left to right like a training poster. Breach teams peeled off through 2 access points, one toward the mixing bay, one down a hallway that opened into a sound-damped press room. From that sightline, stations moved in sync without anyone shouting orders. The setup didn't hint at improvisation. It announced the process. Here's where things got really interesting. The space carried a GMP-light vibe. On the front end, drum mixers and V-blenders stood on anchored pads with grounding straps and anti-static mats. Vacuum-fed granulators linked to stainless ducts that traced the ceiling toward drying ovens with digital temp logs on magnetic clipboards. On the other side of a soft wall partition, industrial tablet presses sat in rows, not hobby rigs. Heavy rotary units with multi-tip tooling designed to drop dense volumes. Coating drums spun behind a secondary barrier, and at the far end, packaging benches weighted with heat sealers and labelers. The question rose itself. Who signs the checks for this level of order? Agents followed the path a batch would take. Raw powders came in through a controlled door to color-coded bins. Blue for actives, yellow for binders, green for lubricants. Each tote had a batch card tied to it with mix ratios, operator IDs, and timestamps. Next to the mixers, they found counterfeit imprint dies laid out on foam inserts. The die sets mirrored legitimate pill codes and logos, down to font weight and bevels. On the street, that defeats quick visual checks. A patrol officer glances, sees a known imprint, and moves on. Here, the press could swap dies fast, run multiple looks in the same shift, and flood different markets with legit faces on illicit cores. Throughput numbers backed the scale. A small TDP bench press might spit out a few thousand tablets an hour. Even a basic rotary table tops out in the low tens of thousands if you nurse it. These industrial multi-station presses, with multi-tip tooling on each punch, can hit 6 figures per hour when fed and maintained. Stack a few of them, run in staggered cycles, and 3 million pills stops looking like a season's work. That's several hard days at peak tempo with minimal downtime and proper granule flow, especially with vacuum feeds keeping the hoppers topped and dust under control. Environmental controls told another story. The HVAC didn't just cool, it scrubbed. You could see pre-filters leading to HEPA banks and carbon beds meant to kill odor plumes. The press rooms had sound-dampening panels and sealed doors with door sweeps. That cuts harmonic noise that travels through walls and keeps nuisance complaints low. If a neighbor can't smell solvent or hear a rhythmic thump at 2 a.m., they don't call. If they don't call, patrol doesn't show, and the clock keeps running. Then the logistics trail lit up. Painted on the floor, a pallet jack path ran from packaging to a roll-up door. The loading bay had shrink wrap on dispensers, corner boards, and standardized cartons stacked to uniform heights. That's wholesale thinking, not street bagging. You don't wrap skids unless a truck is coming and a buyer takes delivery by the case. The paper followed the machines. Agents pulled standard operating procedures with revision histories, maintenance logs with parts orders, and supplier invoices that tied specific dies, bearings, filters, and solvents to named vendors. That's not mess. That's a roadmap. And now that the floor plan reads like a business, the real question lands. How did it run that big, that long, without lighting up alarms across overlapping agencies? If the machinery was loud and the money was big, how did no one connect the dots until the end? The answer lives in the seam, where legal supply chains and enforcement blind spots overlap. They bought time by looking normal on paper and forgettable in person. That's the trick. They treated procurement like a legal operation with a different goal. Start with purchasing. Shell importers filed the orders, not the people running the floor. The entities had bland names and clean paperwork. They listed machinery as for nutraceuticals, which gets fewer questions. Blenders, granulators, tablet presses, everything read like vitamins and herbal tablets. Chemicals moved through respectable brokers, coded with wide-use descriptions. Nothing screamed red flag, because each invoice matched a common category. Shipping terms looked ordinary. Freight forwarders, bonded warehouses, customs entries that matched tariff codes for supplements. Even insurance certificates looked tidy. You glance, you move on. That's the moment the case broke open. Local patrol logs were drowning. Calls for overdoses, domestic disputes, traffic stops, you name it. Call centers triage noise complaints down the list. An industrial thrum at dinner time never beat a priority call. Over time, stretched teams thin. A quiet factory with glaze on the windows felt like an afterthought. No smell, no smoke, no fights in the parking lot. That buys months, sometimes years. The paperwork game layered protection. Multiple LLCs signed rotating leases. One entity rented the space, another paid utilities. A third owned the racks and listed them as removable trade fixtures. Modular racking meant they could shift an aisle overnight and claim a tenant improvement. Add rolling equipment on skids, and they could disappear a production cell between inspections. Each slice by itself looked lawful. Stack them together, and you get a moving target that never sits still long enough to flag a pattern. That's where the cross-border checks come in. Interpol channels and partner systems track more than fugitives. A VA and other global databases log stolen equipment serials, precursor shipments tied to foreign seizures, and identities that bounce between passports and aliases. When those serials reappear in customs photos, or a precursor's list mirrors a blocked shipment abroad, investigators get a thread. Not proof, just a thread. Dig deeper and the pattern map starts to draw itself. CCIS style hits match vehicles to border crossings that make no sense for a vitamin business. Phones show IME is traveling with luggage across the same routes as the shipments. Passport numbers attached to corporate filing stateside. None of this arrests anyone on day one. It builds a picture. It tells a judge why a warrant makes sense before boots touch the door. But that's not all. Heavy machinery purchase orders traced to overseas vendors started to echo shipping container numbers already flagged in fentanyl precursor cases. The linkage isn't in the bill of sale. It's in the container journey, the transshipment port, and the timestamps. Local landlords see rent checks and tidy lobbies. They don't see that a press crate rode the same voyage as a chemical seizure 3 months earlier. Data does. So the tip that moved the case wasn't a neighbor peeking through blinds. It was a match. Interpol hits fused with U.S. financial suspicious activity reports. Cash flows left the Shell network and landed on the same days that trucks offloaded equipment. Wire notes used the same generic descriptions again and again. That convergence squeezed the seam shut.